to be asked to present the Katherine B. Fite lecture at the 14th IHL Roundtable, and to see, if only remotely, colleagues whom I have known for more years than most of us care to remember at this point in our lives. The thoughts I share with you today are my personal views based on my years of experience as a career prosecutor. They do not reflect the official position of any court or prosecutor's office. As a career prosecutor, my comments will focus on investigation and prosecution. Throughout the world, we are reminded today of the evil that men and women do, from the ongoing genocide in occupied Tibet to the Russian invasion of Ukraine to the rise of fascist domestic terrorism in the United States and worldwide. This evil is done first and foremost by those who abuse their de facto and de jure positions of authority and power to sow discord, hatred, and fear, all to secure or maintain a grip on power and associated corrupt affluence. Those for whom truth is to be spoken only when it favors their evil agenda, and to be discarded or ignored when it does not, and by those who are incited to violence by these influential evildoers. We're also reminded that evil prevails when good men and women do nothing, and that too often good men and women do nothing. But what can we do in face of the evil that we face today? Evil that assigns accountability not on conduct, which is the essence of justice, but on the identity of the actor. Believe like me, look like me, do what you wish with impunity. So what can we do? Well, as Edward Everett Hale so rightly said, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. Together and individually, good men and women can and must do something. Together and individually, we must insist on a rule of law based on equality and fairness, a rule of law which imposes accountability based on conduct, not on the identity of the actor. And we must take care not to allow the law to be perverted to serve anti-democratic authoritarian purposes. For remember, the rule of law can be twisted to serve evil. We need only recall that the Nazis had laws which promoted their evil agenda. And we must remember those in the judiciary who enforce those laws. Individually and collectively, we can also combat this evil in other ways, including by speaking out against those who promote fear, divisiveness, and hatred, and against proposed laws which exploit these emotions. This can be a frightening, even dangerous undertaking. But we can also act through the ballot box by denying evildoers and their sycophants the power and deference of elected office. And we can, as Katherine B. Fite did, act by bringing to a fair and impartial criminal reckoning those evildoers and their followers where sufficient evidence exists to prove their criminality, regardless who they are, their age, their gender, social and economic standing, positions of de facto or de jure authority. Bring them to a reckoning based on conduct, not on the identity, beliefs, or position of the actor. That task is not easy, but it is made less difficult by the work that has already been done. The law and procedures established at Nuremberg and Tokyo, the enactment of the Geneva Conventions, the Genocide Convention, the Torture Convention, the Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and the corresponding evolution of customary law, and by the work of the ICTY and the ICTR, the hybrid courts such as the Special Court for Sierra Leone, Special Tribunal for Lebanon, and the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia. These developments, these courts, have helped flesh out the law and procedures applicable in international courts investigating and trying international crimes. They've given us lessons learned that we must apply to effectively carry out investigations and trials, to most efficiently spend other people's money and best use scarce resources as we carry out these duties. But given the complexity of investigating and prosecuting international crimes, how do we actually go about it? Well, we do it the same way we eat the elephant, one bite at a time. No matter how large or small the furor over or support for the criminal conduct, the media attention or lack thereof, the world's focus on the conduct, we bring individuals to account through the same systematic, informed decision-making at each step of the process, remembering that it is just as important to say no when we do not have a case as it is to say yes and move forward when we do have a case. We carry out the investigations and make decisions as to what crimes, if any, and persons, if any, we charge, the same way we would if we were faced with a single one-day event. That is, by considering not what we think we know, not what we know, but what we can prove. Well, how do we know what we can prove? Let's take a few moments and consider this question. And again, regardless how notorious or largely unknown the crimes, how keen the international and domestic audiences are to act, how complex or relatively straightforward the circumstances, whether committed on the international stage or domestically, we determine what we can prove by focusing on the three basic components of the process: the elements of the crimes and forms of liability, the credibility of the evidence relevant to these elements, and the admissibility of that evidence. This is the critical and fundamental focus for all investigations and prosecutions. In turn, we apply what I call the no-Goa approach to this focus. And by Goa, I do not mean the resort town in India. We know the mandate of the forum in which we operate. That is, the elements of the crimes and forms of liability, the procedures, judicial decisions made in that forum, including how the judges define the elements, how they assign credibility, and how they determine admissibility. That gives us the framework in which we must operate. Then we move to Goa. We gather all relevant information defined very broadly, be it potentially incriminating or exculpatory. And this is the part of the process that we do very well. We gather, we deposit, we gather, we deposit. This results in a lot of visible activity that the donors really like to see. However, without concurrent O and A, this is a lot of inefficient activity which can undermine timely, informed decision-making regarding crimes and forms of liability to charge. If we do not know the import of what we have, we do not know what we need to move forward. And that leads us to O and A. So as we gather the information, we must organize it by elements of the crimes and forms of liability that are within the jurisdiction of the forum in which we're operating. In other words, we put that information into elements boxes. And we must also analyze this evidence by credibility and admissibility as we organize. To do this well, an elements-focused, user-friendly database is essential to our ability to carry this out. Given a database that is put in place at the very beginning, not toward the end or somewhere in the middle, and is used from the very beginning, with the ability to retrieve information based on several criteria, its relevance to the elements being first and foremost, but also including data points, allowing us to retrieve the information based on events, locations, named perpetrators or units or organizations, and the sensitivity and confidentiality of the information among those other data points. Only in this way can we efficiently and effectively determine what crimes we can prove and against whom. And at the international court level, we carry out this exercise always with a view toward moving up as high on the ladder as we can, based on the law applied to the facts. For it is states which have the primary responsibility to bring lower level perpetrators to justice or deal with their criminality in other ways, such as truth and reconciliation commissions, depending on the relative seriousness of the individual's culpability. Though these lower level perpetrators become very important in proving the cases against higher level accused. Those of us who have been privileged to investigate the evils being perpetrated today and bring the perpetrators to account have a sobering duty, one that must be carried out objectively in full accord with the law and procedures of the forum in which we operate. As with most aspects of life, the judicial process is ultimately a system of human interaction. The success of the system depends on the integrity and honor of all participants. As criminal investigators and prosecutors, we must always hold ourselves to the highest standard of integrity. Prosecutors have a duty to respect the entire process, including the rights it affords to suspects and accused persons. We must zealously prosecute accused persons for crimes proven by sufficient evidence, but must always proceed only where our actions have a good faith basis in law and fact. Only in this way can the rule of law be upheld impartially and independently, fairly, to those victimized and to those accused of the victimization. I have focused on the prosecutorial function, but it is equally true that for the rule of law to be held impartially, independently, and fairly, the forum in which we operate must have qualified defense counsel of integrity who zealously defend those accused of crimes, and judges who act impartially and independently, bound only by the law and the facts. The evil that men and women do seems to be on the rise today. That evil must be vigorously opposed, condemned, investigated, and prosecuted at all levels. All good men and women who make up the majority of Earth's inhabitants play a role, from the ballot box to the crime scenes to the courtroom. Together, we can hold high the rule of law and protect the right each of us has to live a life free of violence, to live a life in peace, and to fully exercise our fundamental rights. Thank you. The key to success or failure in all of these courts, again, comes back to the human factor. Do you have competent people who are motivated to do the best they can to bring justice in these situations? We've had, and I have been privileged to work with so many outstanding people, dedicated to doing the work, doing it fairly, doing it honestly, doing it with integrity. There have been other people who have not been that motivated, have not been that skilled, and in some instances have not, in my view, been people of the level of integrity and honor that are required. So I think it is bringing the right people with the right skill sets and the right sense of ethics and responsibility into their respective jobs. I think the biggest challenge in that area is how we select judges. It's been a hit or miss process, and too much of it has been political horse trading by countries. Now, it's understandable that a country would not want to give up its best jurists, but there are ways to overcome that, to have really set periods of time and to manage cases efficiently so they can be done in set periods of time, and then to reward those people when they go back to their home countries. But today it is very much, I like this guy, he's my brother-in-law, she's my sister, I owe them a debt, or you do this for me and I'll do this for you. So it's been very much a political negotiation. You know, if you come into these courts, let's say at a P1 level, there are certain basic standards you have to meet or you're not qualified. That's not really true when you pick judges, and it should be true. And there should be an impartial body of experienced jurists who have proven themselves, who give you the basic cutoff. And then you can do what you want in terms of prioritizing who you take, but they all have the same fundamental skills. And that's not always been true, not always been true. I think that we could do disclosure a lot better. Disclosure is a headache, whether you're a prosecutor in a national system or an international system, but there are better ways to do it. And I think the cases that were successful, we had people of integrity on the defense and the prosecution, and we had a very straightforward and honest disclosure process so the defense could be prepared to defend their case, to attack the evidence where it was weak, to make the arguments that were called for by the state of the evidence. So that's an area that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't work. One of the biggest failings also we had in all these courts was no good database system. I think at the ICTY we were 8 or 9 years or more into our operations before we had a halfway decent database system. And you have so much information that you can't build your best case or decide you don't have a case, and you can't do effective disclosure unless you have a good database. I think that, again, progress has been made on that, but that caused untold headaches at many of these courts. So that was something that, that could certainly be improved. But again, I think also when you look at leadership, at some of these courts, I think that the courts did well in spite of the leadership instead of because of it. And so I think we, again, need to put people in positions of leadership who are true leaders. But again, I've worked with outstanding people. I've been involved in cases that went very well, where we had excellent defense counsel, we had excellent judges, and I've been involved in cases where it was not quite like that. So again, I think it comes down to the framework of the court being very clear, and the personnel being skilled and experienced and people of integrity in the jobs that they are doing.